to the extent there's an issue, it would be more about the microphone and the fact that it can listen into conversations and basically track who's thinking what. And there's so much power in that potentially that even if it's not being used presently, it's only a matter of time before somebody taps into that data and starts using it to shape things they are not entitled to shape.
What you're seeing in front of you is Ava reconstructing my profile picture in the style of her drawings from the film. Alongside a fake Tinder account created for attendees of South by Southwest Film Festival, the promotional aspects of the film alone give off the impression that Ava has already escaped into the real world. It's fairly well known that science fiction's perspective on artificial intelligence allows for a reflection on humanity at the root of its messages. Ex Machina is no exception to this, but has a greater emphasis on inevitability and strikes a chord with modern audiences that wouldn't have been possible to envisage 20 years ago. Through an examination of the film and its context, I aim to provide a reading of the film that gives clarity to the film's intentions and some of the concerns it raises about technology and the future of mankind. Deception plays a large role in the film. Even from Nathan and Caleb's introduction, we can see that Nathan has plenty to hide. His physique creates an intimidating presence, shown in his first appearance on screen, but also by the location choice. The huge Norwegian landscape, where parts of the film were shot, reflect the sheer power he wields as both king of AI and the creator of the appropriately titled search engine / social media company Blue Book. In creating Nathan's character, Oscar Isaac adopted a Stanley Kubrick-style beard, who was also an elusive genius, creating masterful works of art in secret. When we understand that Caleb wasn't simply drawn out of a hat so that he could visit Nathan, Caleb was being manipulated before he even knew he was going anywhere. Not only do we see some form of facial recognition software marking out his expressions in the opening scene, but his dead family, agreeableness, and eagerness to impress his boss demonstrate the weakness in his character. These faults, as Nathan sees them, are exploited to the point where we begin to question who is really being tested in the facility, Caleb or Ava. Being unable to fully access the entirety of the building, and even being aware that he could be locked in at any moment, shows that he is as much a prisoner as Ava.
Do you like Nathan?
Yes, of course.
Is Nathan your friend?
My friend? Yeah, I hope so.
This reaction says all about the dynamics of Nathan and Caleb's relationship. This is explored further in the two instances of Nathan talking to his prisoners with pieces of paper involved. The way that Nathan physically dominates the two characters in these scenes by having him sit in the same position asserts his authority further. Even the layout of the chamber Ava inhabits makes the audience question whether Ava passing the Turing test is the real intention of Caleb's invitation.
Mark said, let's give Ava a lot of room to walk around, but let's keep Caleb in a tiny box. When Ava walks around, she's more like a tiger in a zoo, walking backwards and forwards over the same spot.
By deliberately keeping information from Caleb, Nathan also holds intellectual superiority too. He hates the answers Caleb gives to his questions, but only because Nathan already knows the answers. There are two other instances of Caleb being tested that spring to mind. Firstly, when the pair are having dinner, Caleb lies to Nathan about what happened during the power cut. Here, he has to use the same deceptive tactics that he would need at the end of the film, where he attempts to set Ava free, which is ultimately what Nathan wanted out of him. Secondly, after Ava dresses herself up for Caleb, we see her walking around her room intercut with extreme close-ups of Caleb's body parts. The fusion of CCTV footage and the close-ups position the audience as voyeurs, both watching Ava and Caleb. This allows Nathan to analyze an instance of a human falling in love, obtaining more behavioral information that he can program into his final machine. Ava's follow-up model is only briefly mentioned, but is still fairly important to the story because this is the only goal Nathan has on his mind, as he doesn't appear to have a higher purpose for his other models aside from screwing them.
What will happen to me if I fail your test? Do you think I might be switched off because I don't function as well as I'm supposed to?
Ava, I don't know the answer to your question.
Do you have people who test you and might switch you off?
No, I don't.
Then why do I?
By posing this question, Garland examines how narrow the human perceptions of artificial intelligence really are.
I think we're anxious about AIs at the moment, and I felt that at the time of writing. It's now become really clear because it seems like every week there's some kind of pronouncement about the dangers of AIs. I think you have to differentiate between AIs as non-sentient, self-aware things, which can be extremely dangerous, and a sentient AI, which is the kind of thing the film is talking about. I don't feel alarmed about the idea of sentient AIs. I think it would be terrific if that were to happen.
The personification of this misunderstanding is channeled through Caleb in the initial tests he does on Ava. The first problem that becomes apparent is that he speaks to her as though she is inhuman. For example, he doesn't ask her what her name is, but if she has one. One can imagine the same question being posed to a poverty-stricken child, and Caleb, being as smart as he is, surely would know the level of intellect required of a machine that can replicate consciousness. What we can take from this, therefore, is that our own methods of testing consciousness are flawed. The knowledge of being in the presence of an AI immediately forces the mind to discriminate, and thus Caleb cannot communicate like he would with any other human being. As the film progresses, Ava changes the rules of the test so that she can eliminate the biases in Caleb's mind. In test 2, Ava decides she needs to learn more about Caleb in order to establish a relationship. In test 3, she wears clothes to cover up her mechanical parts, and in test 4, it's Ava who asks Caleb the questions. Finally, in test 5, when asked to recall his earliest memory, he begins to describe it, but she immediately identifies it as a lie. He then says "really," as though he didn't even know he was consciously lying. Or was he just mistaken? How would she be able to tell? Another problem that arises with designing sentient AI comes down to the design itself. God supposedly created mankind in his image, and consequently mankind will create its own race of beings in its image. In order to create the perfect human being, all the negative aspects must be programmed into it too, otherwise it won't pass for a human. So looking at this empathetically, it's understandable why an AI would object to being programmed to be human instead of being programmed to be itself. Out of all the characters in the story, Kyoko embodies this idea of identity confusion best. She has been created for the sole purpose of pleasure and also reflects this notion of being created in a creator's image. She was created by a man who is driven by being perfect, and thus she must be perfect too. We see God and creation not dancing together, but in fact imitating each other, showing that there's no connection between the pair aside from the sexual angle. This exposes Nathan's weakness when playing God, that being his sexual ineptitude. He doesn't want a woman who will disagree with him or challenge him. We saw how his previous models ended up after they tried to do this, when Caleb sees the same self-destruction play out over and over again on his screen. Although Nathan claims that Kyoko doesn't understand English, I firmly believe she does, and has just been muted. This explains the various shots we see of her appearing to be consciously aware of her surroundings, and when we see her attempting to communicate with Ava before her escape. Nathan was naive to assume Kyoko wouldn't be able to express herself in a way that extends beyond human sophistication, which ultimately led to his downfall. Nathan's flaw is very well hidden behind his intellectual veil, and this can be no better demonstrated than in the scene when Nathan confronts Caleb about sexual preferences and programming orientation. Caleb finds it astounding that Nathan would program a robot for the purposes of sex. It seems logical enough to leave that part of the body out of the design, given that robots don't reproduce. But simultaneously, Ava is programmed to enjoy the experience like a human would. We then end up in the Westworld territory of debating whether it's ethical to smash up these robots because they have no biological connection to us. I think that the film is arguing that having sexual preferences is no more controllable than any other choice you perceived to be making. To say that we should be the judge of what robots enjoy doing is totalitarian just on a surface level. Ava was programmed to be sexual, but not specifically towards Caleb, who again makes the mistake of treating the AI as different from human and thinking that they should be programmed beyond human limitations. If such attitudes towards artificial intelligence were changed, then AIs would be able to integrate into human society better than if we tried to make them as ideal as we wanted them to be. This attitude was adopted by both visual and artistic levels of production. Unlike many modern science fiction blockbusters, Ex Machina was shot as live action in its entirety, meaning that all the special effects you see in the film were added in post-production without the use of green screens or tracking markers on set. In an interview with The Verge, visual effects designer Andrew Whitehurst claimed that he didn't allow his team to, quote, look at robots, and instead focused on the application of mechanics with inspiration drawn from human anatomy anatomy and sculptures. What's even more interesting is that the reluctance to focus on the futuristic elements of the story ended up winning the film the Oscar for Best Visual Effects that year. This surprised everyone given its competition was Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian, and Star Wars Force Awakens, all intriguingly having way higher budgets than Ex Machina 2. In order to achieve the see-through effect of Ava's abdomen, the team filmed Alicia Vikander performing and then replicating the shot's movements and angles without Vikander being in view. This probably explains the over-dependence on these slow forward zooms that are dotted around the film, but the only time the camera zooms out in this very slow fashion is when Caleb starts to rebel against Nathan for the first time. I thought this was a nice touch, seeing as it shows the exact moment human dominance begins to shrink. Garland commented on this idea in an interview with Sci-Fi Wire, and he comments on this in relation to the singularity, the point in human history where machine intelligence supersedes human intelligence. I think there's a growing sense of fear about artificial intelligence that you see manifested a lot at the moment. There's tons of films about AI which take a sideways or fearful look at it. Part of my starting point in this was that on an instinctive level, I don't feel affiliated with that sense of concern. My instinctive position is that I actually want it. Now remember, he's talking about sentient AI here, not just powerful machines. This unusual optimism for AI is certainly reflected in the film's ending, as the tyrant is struck down by his own creation and his worst nightmare plays out right in front of him. There doesn't appear to be any kind of desperation from the two girls. Instead, there's a methodical and careful nature to the killing. Knowing she will give Nathan a slow and painful death, Ava shows she is already aware of the transfer of power that has taken place from creator to creation. This moment here and right up to the end is where the film's title comes into play. The term Deus Ex Machina refers to a commonly used plot device that resolved Greek tragedies, where a deity would descend down from the heavens to resolve conflict and create a happy ending. Ava can be regarded as such an entity because the antagonist has been stopped and her freedom acquired. The color tones we've seen dominating the entire film finally show their true meaning in the closing moments of the film. Ava has been reborn as a result of her triumph over her master. The harsh red lighting at the facility represents the womb, with the outside world contrasting this idea with its bright greens, and Caleb, remaining in the womb and frozen like prey, becomes aware of who will replace humanity at the top of the predatory hierarchy. Thanks for watching. It's so strange analysing this film because I feel like I've already analysed it before. Why? Because a particular Black Mirror episode also stars Domhnall Gleeson in a story about artificial intelligence which derives said intelligence from social media. I spoke more about social media in that video, the link to which will appear on screen now. Go and check it out if you haven't already. How many years do you reckon it'll take for our robot overlords to drive us all to extinction, or will we get there first? Comment below, where we will continue this discussion.